Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars, random rockers. Don't worry, it's not like the last one. I'll do hats off spoilers this time. But that ain't happening yet. For now, we're going to talk about The Last Jedi. The 8th in the mainline series, but technically, in terms of theatrical release, the 10th film is overall in the Star Wars franchise, which means now you can make a top 10 list if you want. More than likely, most people will be putting the Clone Wars movie that led to the TV series as probably their worst. I can't say I blame them. It probably should have been a meant-for-TV film anyway. And it fits better there, actually. So, there's that. I'm going to just say this right now. I really, I'm a casual Star Wars fan, and so I'm not a hardcore one, so I'm not going to be bitching. It's not that I don't understand where you're coming from, but at the same time, most of your hardcore fans are going to do whatever you have to do to basically have me not enjoy this film, which basically means you don't understand, haven't watched any actual films in general, because Star Wars inspired us to want to go and watch films, and that's exactly what we got. And I'm going to move this over a little bit, guys. Forgive me. All right, thank you. Sorry, there was something there I didn't want to have you see, and I'm going to keep that in there. No editing, because I suck at editing myself. So, Last Jedi, back to talking on that. I really did enjoy this. There are a lot of good moments in here, and there is just one bad subplot that could easily make me say The Force Awakens would be better, but that's actually not the case. I like this better than The Force Awakens, because it had taken some balls and some risks that needed to be taken, some maybe not so much, or at least needed to be executed better to where it would have been more acceptable. And some that, honestly, because of the recent things that had happened, particularly Carrie Fisher's passing, some scenes involving that and how they handled that was very jarring for a lot of people who were really impacted by the death of Carrie Fisher. So I wish they could have handled that far better. I'll talk more about that when we get to the spoiler part of this review. Or the spoiler talk, I should say. And then there's and as far as I'm concerned, the truest, most character development in terms of the newer characters is in truth is Kylo Ren, which we needed it, because he went from being kind of an emo bastard, but a better handled emo bastard than what we got out of Anakin, which led to Darth Vader, which made no sense at all. And it didn't felt like it just made Darth Vader a far. We already knew he was somewhat lesser via to that of Sidious just off of Return of the Jedi, but this made it worse. But that, with the way Revenge of the Sith did it, it did make it worse. And it's sad to say that Revenge of the Sith was the first Star Wars film I ever saw in a theater, or anything in general, in its entirety. Sadly, I know. So yeah, so you can't exactly blame me as a casual fan, but it wasn't so bad to the point where I wasn't interested in it. Hell, I was lucky that I didn't remember it when I decided to finally see Empire Strikes Back, and the one scene hit. The only issue is by that point I was like, oh wait, Revenge of the Sith happened. I've seen it. I already know this because of that. Oh, fuck. So yeah, Revenge of the Sith kind of ruins that perfect moment in this film. That was a big shocker for back then and all that stuff. Also, I chose to wear this shirt because it's the closest thing to Star Wars I've got in terms of attire. If you think about it, it looks like Force Lightning, and this looks like some opening into one of the ships. But anyway, I must, Finn's storyline and Rose, I feel bad because we had such good development out of Finn in Force Awakens, and we got nothing out of him here. And it's just kind of annoying. Just very kind of annoying. But yeah. I've definitely liked that we got a lot more out of Poe compared to Force Awakens. That was definitely needed. It, some people probably will hate him because he think he's too much of a hotshot pilot, and he kind of was. But you kind of sympathize for him to the point where even when he pulls something that you shouldn't be sympathizing for him, and later in the film, blah blah blah. We'll get to that part in a minute or two. The best thing about this film, to me, is some of its, and the whole is mostly that of Rey and Luke's storyline on the island. And whatnot, and there are certain little things that do work as cameos that it's a shame that aren't cameos much anymore, and I'm kind of bummed about that, but like with a certain character that was in Force Awakens only getting a short time period, but I didn't care enough to be as attached to this character, so it didn't really bother me as much. I couldn't even tell you the name, even though that character played a bit of an important part in Force Awakens, at least somewhere in the middle of it. But I did enjoy what we got as for that film as an opener, and this kind of being supposed to be the climax of this entire part of the thing that's supposed to be a trilogy in and of itself. And yeah, this is supposed to be the ending, and Rian Johnson directed this, and J.J. Abrams, who is now going to wind up directing Episode 9, due to things not going over well now with Colin Trevorrow, another one of the big issues we've had recently in terms of what the hell is Lucasfilm doing kind of situations, but Abrams might have been the best and safest choice, and right now it's kind of going to make me sad to say this, but Rian Johnson, you did fine with this film. You did good. You helped give us another good Star Wars film. But as far as your discography is concerned, and I have yet to even see Looper, and I've only seen Brick, which if I can just find out what I did with that DVD somewhere, be right back. I'll find it somewhere. You know what? I'll find it somewhere. Like I said, Brick. You did Brick, and yeah, just off of just seeing this alone, barely getting a chance to see Looper, which I should have already seen before I seen this, so I had a better idea of what I was getting myself into as far as Rian Johnson's own directing style, because it's clearly there somewhere, But this, it bothers me so, man. This winds up having to be considered at this point his worst of his discography. And I have yet to see Looper, and that does bum me out as far as Rian Johnson is concerned. And yet it kind of has me worried. And mostly I'm just more pissed. I don't hate this movie at all. I know it's flawed, but the pros truly outweigh the cons. Even with one of its biggest cons that could easily put this down below Force Awakens as a film. And maybe even Return to the Jedi to a certain extent, but I will say it's better than Force Awakens, but I almost like it better than Rogue One, despite the fact that third act in Rogue One, slight spoilers, was one of the best things ever, and best payoffs. We have a good third act here that definitely does pay off, but not nearly as well as Rogue One, but just we have enough stuff that happens at moments spliced in throughout the movie that really keeps you still worthwhile, and just so much to take in that keeps you worthwhile and engaged, and to the point where you have to go back and see it a few extra times to notice all the little subtleties and details that help show what makes Rian Johnson a good filmmaker and why he seemed like a good choice for this film. And in my opinion, this took a risk. It may have had some callbacks to Empire Strikes Back, but even Return of the Jedi, for that matter. But not, and of course, Force. Basically, the past three, if you're going chronologically, from episode-wise, past three films, being that of 5, 6, and 7, and which is definitely what this 7, obviously, for more obvious reasons, but yes. And I was going to say, Mark Hamill basically brought his best performance as Luke, even though, for the most part, he was clearly a Yoda meets Obi-Wan kind of thing, and mostly an Obi-Wan. We'll get to that later in the spoilers, but overall, I enjoyed this film. I can't say part of me wants to say it rocks because I know I give Force Awakens rocks, but I've grown not nearly as fond of that movie over time. I still love it, but I just overall, man, the best I can truly give it's a thumbs up for me, man. Uh, and my and overall, I would say I would say it's definitely worth a theater experience. More for a matinee, but just to where when it comes to actually going to see it in the theater, it'd probably be more worth the money you paid for, given paying a cheaper ticket, but via matinee, of course. And that's what I'd have to say about that film. And now is the time for the hats off spoilers in 3, 2, 1. Here we go. I loved how we began with this, with straight into the fight. And straight into the fight. Poe did have a certain kind of cocky humor to him, and him messing with the one with Hux, General Hux, was hysterical. Somewhat hysterical. I kind of bought that, but I was frustrated with him telling Leia, no, we're doing it this way, and it's not, and it did pan out, but at the risk of losing more Resistance fighters. And the one scene with the one chick that actually managed to pull it off and winds up, and that connection to Rose is what makes us want to try to connect to Rose, to the character of Rose, which we will get to her a little bit later. But when it comes down to it, with Poe, that was brilliant. I understand, like, he was cocky and he kind of overstepped his bounds, and you don't say no to Leia. So yeah, I understand somewhat understand Leia's demotion, but at the same time, with what little resistance you have right now, and you can't exactly just tell them go take him from a commander to a captain, or just demote him despite the circumstance. I mean, unless the demotion was just a small, minute demotion, the commander, captain is like, but if it's like a big demotion in terms of the rankings of the Resistance fleet, then yeah, that's a bit too much. I'm sorry. Sorry on that, Leia, especially. But, we're willing to just let it slide because of, Carrie Fisher's passed on, rest in peace. And that's another thing. And that's the only thing about this first act that really bothers me. And then that really honestly bothers me. Not even the stuff that kind of starts off when it comes to what Luke does on the island when he finally has been given the lightsaber and he just chucks it. Mostly done for comedic effect, but they try to make it more of a serious moment, and she just goes after the lightsaber, and then we get the fucking porgs for the first time. Yeah, at this point, I was okay with it, because they did seem like they were part of their environment. They didn't seem as much like they were a problem. And then, but that doesn't happen until much later in the movie. The one scene that where you see him in the trailer. Oh, it's not the only part in that part. I'm just gonna tell you that right now. Before we get to that, it's mostly that he was dealing with
powering off.
I apologize. That was my speaker thing, Bluetooth speaker. Hopefully, you can still hear me with this. And anyway, I'm just surprised with. It's still rattling in my brain. So my pauses, I'm sorry. It's just how it is. And I was taken aback. did feel the only thing that could allow me to say The Force Awakens is better is that I didn't feel as inspired, I guess. As inspired as I would have before. Though I did feel a sense of inspiration when you do it like that opening crawl. Always gets you every time. Every time. And then, of course, we have, and then Finn coming out of his little coma thing. They try to make some funny little thing with that. BB-8 is pretty cool throughout this whole thing, for the most part, until he becomes more involved in Finn's part of the story. Even though he might have been the only part of that Finn story that actually might have been decent, aside from the character of DJ, that's played by Benicio del Toro, and he's basically a master code breaker that they were hoping to use as a means to help them deal with the fact that after they took out this one big ship from the bombs, they've tried to flee light speed, only to find out that they have a tracker on, that the First Order now has a tracker on one of their ships. Of course, know that Resistance are basically, this is all that's left of the Resistance in numbers because of the fact that the New Republic is had been destroyed from the Starkillers base, pretty well leaving them with nothing for support. Not that Leia didn't have any anymore, since they all found out who her daddy is. Speaking of living up to Vader, Kylo Ren, he was already considered disappointed, and we found out that through that tracking device situation was what made Snoke feel better about whatever was the issue that he was dealing with. And and then him, at that point I thought Kylo was really going to turn on. I knew Kylo was going to turn on Snoke the way that he was being bitched at. But the one thing that he was bitched at was just destroy and take off that mask, and he didn't have to have this mask on. We've already seen his face. It's kind of pointless for him to keep this mask on and try to be Vader when he's not Vader. In fact, they found a way to make him better, and we'll get to that. In fact, he truly is, in a way, what the Anakin Skywalker character was trying to be, but failed miserably to be, to lead him to being Darth Vader. And when it came to the prequels, I'm not a prequelist if you haven't noticed that. In spite of the fact that I do like Revenge of the Sith for what it is, to an extent. But its cons still kind of outweigh its pros in that film, whereas this doesn't have that Revenge of the Sith thing, or even Rogue One's issue, for that matter, to where it was just I couldn't attach to any of these characters. When I've already become attached to these characters thanks to Force Awakens, and I'm still somewhat attached, and I've grown even more attached. I'm actually enjoying Kylo Ren now as a villain, more so or less than anything. Adam Driver, you're doing wonders right now, and I'm hoping now with them, rest of the cast working with him and Luke, Rey, those characters are the ones that are the scene stealers of this movie. Poe does what he can, but there's not too much. He's far more involved than he was in Force Awakens, but there's not much for him to do other than just being a catalyst, just dealing with the new person that's in charge after what happened with Leia, which we didn't see coming. They make us feel like they about actually killed her off, even though they already had mentioned, we already did. So it kind of takes away the fact that, and then keep teasing, we're going to kill her off, but we're not. This would have been so different and less painstaking if we didn't have to deal with the fact of Carrie Fisher's passing. That was the only thing that made those scenes, especially the one that comes off a little Superman-ish, and the only one and final time, the final time we got to see, finally getting to see her actually use the Force. But the way they use it, it comes off in a way that has become memed currently via that of another John Williams score from another different movie. Particularly the Christopher Reeves era Superman, more specifically. Oh boy. They don't use it in this. I mean, no. But yeah, you get the idea. It's just ridiculous. I didn't, in fact, enjoy... Boars were kind of fine. They were kind of cute. I was like, okay, when it came to those scenes, especially like Chewie trying to eat them, he was, and it was already weird with seeing, I mean, the weirdest thing was seeing Luke milking this one weird walrus-looking thing. That milkers looked like legitimate, actual tatas. Uh, So, which was slightly awkward, and it just had everyone saying it's green, but it looks more bluish green than anything, or greenish blue. Either way, and having that be that's just weird. Didn't really need that, but it was more of a just another thing of like, this is my day in the life. You want some? No, no, then just leave me alone. It's like just furthering him being just a bigot or whatever, just a sort of a grump in a way, in the same way sense that Yoda kind of was. It was throughout Empire and whatnot, and he's going through these things and all that stuff, and how to train him, and then finding out finally even more Kylo Ren's backstory, and how Rey somehow through Force is somehow connecting to them, even though that turns out later to be Snoke. That's kind of using him as a conduit to get to Rey to force him to see her and probably try to turn her into the dark side, which inevitably fails, but we'll get more into that in a little bit. And I really did enjoy. Post storyline wasn't too much. It was led to them trying to leave the ship. Them angrily, he didn't get to know what it was, but she proved to be a leader by not having to say anything. But at the same time, you understood her not saying anything and making it look like they were just retreating when really they were trying to find a better place and just using, say, the cruiser they've got as just a decoy. But it was already too late because the freaking DJ's guy made it worse. So inevitably they fail and things are made worse from Finn and storyline, which that whole thing at that planet was retarded. I mean, on paper, it could have been done better. For sure, it was a good idea, but in execution, it was just poorly done, and it felt prequelish. And I don't even want to talk about it at all. Rose was pointless. The only thing is, she was kind of meant to to be the fan, the Star Wars fan, and yet somehow nobody liked her character. Kind of funny how that is. Almost as if they were trying to basically making it feel like they were mocking the Star Wars fandom, or at least the hardcore ones that are kind of doing these speculations, and then all of a sudden we find out Snoke, that turns out, Kylo Ren had been waiting for his moment of opportunity to basically off him and trying to take the lightsaber. Instead of giving Rey, thinking we were going to give Rey the lightsaber, instead, he just flips it around, turns it on and flips it around, and just cuts him in half, killing him, and then killing all the rest. And it leads into a samurai-esque fight scene with Rey kind of facing off against all the other Imperial Guards looking guys, or at least Knights of Ren, or whatever they were. And it turns out they weren't Knights of Ren, but whatever. It looked awesome, and it was badass. And his motivations were basically screw the Jedi when it came to that scene. And this was starting to happen around the time shortly after the one senator chick, the purple hair girl, whatever her name is. I was more frustrated with her character up until she does her sacrifice thing, which I wish they would have done with Akbar, who wound up getting killed in the transports, and I was very annoyed by that. The one that in Return of the Jedi gives us the classic line, "It's a trap!" Yeah, that Admiral Akbar. Rest in peace on that character, man. And maybe had a few lines, but I barely remembered them compared to his Return of the Jedi line. Trap! And Phasma, you could have done better with Phasma. When you have a Game of Thrones actress like Gwendolyn Christie, use her better. Don't make her just fodder, Boba Fett fodder, or worse than Boba Fett fodder. Come on. That was even more disappointing about that. They could have done something else involving her, and making her a big part of Finn's storyline, as opposed to just a throwaway thing, just like this entire thing has been, and how they failed their mission and it was all pointless. They just threw him in there just so they have something to do, and it wasn't much of anything, and it meant nothing, or at least it just comes off like it meant nothing, even though there was supposedly something more Rian Johnson meant for this to come across as, but it seems like it's going to be needing repeat listens to do so, or watches, I mean, not listens. And then the final thing, and then of course they finally make it to that rebel base that they were trying to flee to, and of course, after the incident it's pretty clear now that Ren is now Supreme Leader of the First Order, and he's just using them by any means to help him. He just wanted the power, basically. He was already full on dark, and the closest thing to the light side that he ever did was not be the one to shoot Leia. It was all the other TIE fighters that basically did it, and led to that one scene. And then the favorite scene is when Luke finally tells Rey about what really happened, and how he basically felt that he had failed, and he basically had another moment of weakness, in the same sense of what happened in Return of the Jedi when it came to about killing Vader, and he was about to do the same to Ben Solo, aka Kylo Ren, and when he finally realizes that, instead of standing a saber like he should have probably at that moment, wrong place, wrong time situation, and he lost it himself, and I think he wound up destroying the temple, and anyone who wasn't, on his side of things, and those who probably were, might have become the Knights of Ren. Who knows? At this point, all we know is now Kylo Ren he's gone full dark side. He's not necessarily a Sith. Or at least he's not considering himself as one. He's just a dark force user at this point. Is the best way to describe him. And we finally get a scene with that is also the scene where we didn't find out till later near the end of the film that Rey does have the books, but if you notice the details, but until they all get on the Millennium Falcon after trying to retreat the Rebel base. But fuck. Just finally having him show up after one of the best cameos we've got is finally seeing, once again, Puppet Yoda, though. The Puppet Yoda. More specifically, the Return of the Jedi / Empire Strikes Back Puppet Yoda. And him doing his thing. Classic thing. Just the whole... Oh, those Jedi books? Page turners. They were not. It's like, yes. And him just force lightning the fucking tree is just... and just him having those talks with him, and that sort of verbal moral lesson moment with Luke was awesome. Also, which was the second best thing nostalgic wise involving Luke. First best thing, second best, though most people will flip flop, I guess, was R2D2. What R2D2 would do to convince D2's meeting with him, and using the message from New Hope that Leia gave to him during New Hope for Ben Kenobi, or Obi-Wan, basically, and just giving him the letter, and just giving him that, and like cheap trick or whatever he said that was probably funnier than what I'm saying right now. I really enjoyed this film. film, as any Star Wars fan honestly should. Any real casual, I should say, Star Wars fan at least. Especially the scene, and I'm not going to forget the scene, and it's the end scene, and just the fact that he force ghosts himself. Though it sucks that it was like, okay, we're not going to kill him off, and they just he just poofs force ghosts in the same way that Obi-Wan did during his fight with Vader in New Hope, and his purpose was similar with dealing with Kylo Ren was similar, and the whole thing about the spark that lights the fire for the resistance to take down bring down the First Order bullcrap. Yeah, that's happened, and a lot of it's dealing with the balance of the Force and all this other thing, and I think she's learning the ways of the Jedi, and now hopefully we'll be able to learn from the mistakes the Jedi had made, and maybe who knows what's going to happen now at this point. And then the thing with the kid was just kind of a Disney-fied way to end things, which didn't need to happen, but just to show that Rian Johnson showing that maybe there's going to be any chance of trying to assemble some sense of good meaning of having gone through all the crap we did in Finn's storyline. But it didn't really, that in and of itself wasn't enough to really pay off anything. If it does, hopefully J.J. Abrams will do something with it in 9, maybe. If not, then it was kind of pointless to even have that ending. Almost in the sense that it would have been pointless with what happened in Batman v Superman's ending with the pebbles lifting up like they did. Especially given what we got out of Justice League. But anyway, speaking of that, this one I'm even more disappointed in terms of the Rotten Tomato critic audience thing. Far more than what we've been hearing on the Justice League spectrum of it. Because this time I'm on more on the critics' side themselves than the fans' side, and at least the fans that are probably the hardcore ones that, are just being little bitches, that are honestly trying to make people like us, who are not only casual Star Wars fans, but also just, your typical movie-going type people who just want to go in and see a good film and even an actually good Star Wars film, which is what we got, a good Star Wars film. I would have liked to have had a great Star Wars film, but with with the fact that we are considering some of the specialized crap as canon now, and with what we had of the prequels, at this point, I'll settle for good, man. If I can't have great. As long as we don't have prequel bad, we'll be happy. The real fans will be happy. And, after 9, I think some people may check out. And I don't know if I will. Maybe we'll see how 9 turns out. But I really did enjoy this movie. Even though I'm sporadically going through the bits of what I liked and what bothered me. But, what did you guys think? What was your favorite moments in this movie? What bothered you the most? But besides maybe the whole all of Finn's storyline and Rose herself maybe or something. I don't know. Just leave a comment below. Let me know. Rock that like button with thrust if you must. And if always, guys, keep it random, keep it real, keep it rocking. I'll see you in the next video, which will hopefully be either Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, and some best of stuff. And some best of lists for films and music this year. Take care, y'all.